The chamber was already tense, but what Mike Pompeo unleashed next cut through the air like a blade. He leaned forward, voice sharpened with disdain, and declared that Jasmine Crockett's entire record was nothing more than a parade of failures, half-baked policies, and empty gestures dressed up as leadership. The words echoed, heavy and biting, calculated not just to wound her credibility, but to humiliate her in front of the nation. The room froze. Cameras zoomed in. A low murmur rippled through the audience before fading into an eerie silence. Even those who had expected fireworks weren't prepared for the venom Pompeo delivered with such smug confidence. His eyes narrowed, his smirk lingering as if he had already won the moment. Gasps echoed across the chamber. Journalists scribbled furiously, sensing a headline born in real time. Supporters of Pompeo shifted forward in their seats, emboldened by the attack. His words weren't just an assault on Crockett. They were an attempt to delegitimize her very place at the table, an old tactic of dismissing voices that refused to bow. And yet, amid the storm of whispers and flashing cameras, Jasmine Crockett did not flinch. She didn't rise to defend herself, nor did she lash back in anger. She sat perfectly still, hands folded, gaze unwavering. Her silence was not weakness, it was a gathering of strength, a composure so unshaken it unnerved even those who didn't know her. Pompeo thought his attack had cornered her. He thought silence meant surrender. But the audience didn't realize what that stillness really was. It was the quiet before the storm. Because what happened when she finally spoke, no one saw coming. For years, Mike Pompeo had built his reputation on brute force politics. He was known as the bulldog, the enforcer, the man who could intimidate his opponents into silence with little more than a glare and a booming voice. He thrived on confrontation, wielding his words like weapons designed to cut his adversaries down before they ever had the chance to strike back. To his supporters, this made him a warrior. To his critics, it made him a bully. But in either case, Pompeo's power came from the perception that no one dared to challenge him head-on. That is what made this debate so electrifying. The stakes stretched far beyond a clash of personalities. At its heart, this was about what America chooses to value in its leaders. Was strength measured by arrogance, by the ability to demean and dismiss? Or was it measured by integrity, by the ability to rise above the mud and stand unwavering in truth? Every camera angle, every flashing headline, every social media clip would carry this battle far beyond the walls of the chamber. This wasn't just Pompeo versus Crockett. It was arrogance versus dignity. And yet, Jasmine Crockett entered this arena already underestimated, dismissed by critics as too new, too outspoken, too unwilling to play by the old rules. Commentators painted her as a voice on the margins, someone Pompeo could swat aside like an afterthought. That underestimation was his weapon and his blind spot, because while Pompeo relished in the theatrics of domination, Crockett understood something deeper. She knew this wasn't about trading insults, it was about showing America what happens when truth refuses to be trampled by bluster. She represented a different kind of power, one that did not roar to command attention but waited patiently for its moment to strike. Every second of her silence was magnifying the stakes. The audience leaned in. The press sharpened their pens. Somewhere in that quiet tension, the story shifted. This was no longer just a clash. It was a test of what kind of politics America would tolerate, and what kind of voices it was ready to lift. Pompeo believed he was dismantling her piece by piece. What he could not see was that every barb, every exaggerated claim, every smug line of attack was weakening his own position. The very ground beneath him was beginning to tremble. And yet, Pompeo had no idea that the very ground beneath him was about to collapse. Because Crockett wasn't just defending herself, she was about to defend something much bigger. Mike Pompeo's rise in American politics was built on the image of unshakable toughness. A West Point graduate, former CIA director, and eventually Secretary of State under Donald Trump, he cultivated a persona of discipline and strength. To his supporters, he was the embodiment of hard-nosed patriotism, a man who projected certainty in a chaotic political era. But beneath that polished exterior lay a record riddled with contradictions, controversies, and a streak of arrogance that would eventually come back to haunt him. During his tenure as Secretary of State, Pompeo often presented himself as a champion of freedom and democracy abroad. He spoke loftily about moral clarity, about America standing tall on the global stage. Yet time and again, his actions betrayed those very words. He defended strongmen when it suited political convenience, downplayed human rights abuses if they came from allies, and cloaked hypocrisy in the language of national interest. For every speech about values, there was a moment where those values bent under the weight of political calculation. That contradiction became the foundation of his style. A man who preached strength but wielded it selectively, who claimed integrity while dismissing those who challenged him. In hearings and interviews, Pompeo's weapon of choice was not reasoned debate, but intimidation. He cut down reporters with sneering quips, mocked rivals with sarcastic barbs, and projected a confidence so absolute that it bordered on disdain. Too many, he was less a statesman and more a bully in a suit. This was the pattern he carried into every confrontation. The louder he was, the more he believed he was winning. His smirk became his shield, his raised voice, his hammer. In politics, perception is power, and Pompeo relied on the perception that his opponents could not withstand the force of his presence. Time and again, he had steamrolled critics, browbeaten questioners, and walked away, appearing untouchable. So, when Jasmine Crockett sat across from him, Pompeo assumed history would repeat itself. He believed his reputation alone would rattle her, that his verbal barrage would push her into a corner where silence meant defeat. In his mind, she was just another opponent to be brushed aside, another stepping stone to prove his dominance in the public arena. After all, he had faced senators, ambassadors, and journalists. What chance did a freshman congresswoman stand against the bulldog of American politics? But what Pompeo failed to understand was that arrogance has a way of blinding even the sharpest operators. He was so accustomed to winning through intimidation that he didn't notice the shift happening around him. Times had changed, and so had the audience. The American public, weary of bluster and arrogance, was beginning to crave something else: honesty, dignity, and authenticity. Crockett embodied all of those things, and Pompeo never saw it coming. He thought his record of aggression would be enough to silence her. What he didn't realize was that his record of hypocrisy had already weakened him. Every insult he hurled was not a show of strength, but a reminder of just how fragile his own image really was. And so, the stage was set. The bulldog was circling, convinced of an easy victory. But the silence across the chamber was telling a different story. Pompeo's greatest miscalculation: underestimating the woman sitting right across from him. Jasmine Crockett's story did not begin in the marble halls of Congress. It began in the kind of working-class neighborhoods where ambition was often stifled by circumstance, where opportunities had to be fought for tooth and nail, raised with little more than grit, determination, and an unshakable belief in her own worth. She carried into adulthood a perspective that would shape everything she became. Crockett understood what it meant to struggle, to be overlooked, to be told no 100 times before finding a single door left open. Those early battles etched resilience into her very being. Before she was a lawmaker, Crockett was an attorney, and not the kind who sought prestige or easy victories. She fought for the voiceless, taking on cases others ignored because the clients couldn't afford flashy representation. In cramped courtrooms, she stood as a defender against injustice, challenging systems that were designed to crush those without power. Her sharp mind and relentless spirit made her formidable, but it was her empathy that made her unforgettable. She listened, she cared, and she refused to let her clients be treated as disposable. Her courtroom battles prepared her for the larger stage of public service. When she eventually entered politics, she carried with her not the polish of a career politician, but the fire of someone who had lived the very struggles she now sought to change. Her speeches in Congress were not dry recitations of policy, but passionate pleas rooted in lived experience. She spoke with the cadence of someone who had seen inequality firsthand, and with the conviction of someone who believed deeply in justice. But Crockett's voice in Congress wasn't just fearless, it was dignified. She never mistook volume for power. She never needed to shout down an opponent to make her point. Instead, she wielded intelligence like a scalpel, cutting cleanly through bluster and exposing the truth beneath. Colleagues and constituents alike learned quickly. When Jasmine Crockett spoke, you listened, because her words carried both weight and purpose. That composure, that quiet authority, was what set her apart. Where others cracked under pressure, Crockett seemed to grow steadier. Where others met insults with rage, she answered with facts, wit, and a disarming calm. She embodied a kind of leadership that was rare in an era of political theatrics. Leadership that did not seek attention for its own sake but demanded respect through its substance. To the critics, who dismissed her as unseasoned, Crockett responded not with insecurity but with results. She outworked, out-argued, and outlasted those who underestimated her. Every barrier she broke, every dismissal she overcame, only sharpened her resolve. And in the process, she became more than just a politician. She became a symbol of resilience. Proof that dignity and determination could not only survive in the rough and tumble of politics, but triumph. And that was the woman sitting silently across from Mike Pompeo. Not the rookie he believed her to be, not the fragile opponent he thought he could intimidate, but a woman forged in struggle, sharpened in battle, and elevated by the very people his brand of arrogance had long ignored. Her silence in that chamber was not surrender. It was the patience of someone who had learned, time and again, that timing is everything. She didn't need to meet his bluster with more noise. She only needed to wait for the exact moment when truth could be unleashed like a thunderclap. And those very qualities, her dignity, her composure, her intelligence, her resilience, were about to become Pompeo's undoing, because when Pompeo turned his attack into a full assault, Crockett's silence finally broke. Mike Pompeo was not finished. What began as a single swipe at Jasmine Crockett's record soon escalated into a full barrage. He leaned into the microphone with the confidence of a man who believed the stage belonged to him alone. His words came faster, sharper, each one designed to cut deeper than the last. She's accomplished nothing of substance. He scoffed, jabbing the air as though swatting away an inconvenience. Her so-called legislative victories, hollow gestures, propped up by a media eager to make her seem larger than life. Let's be honest, she's more concerned with soundbites than solutions. A ripple of murmurs ran through the audience. Cameras flashed like lightning, catching the hardened sneer on his face. Pompeo sensed the energy shifting in his favor. His voice grew louder, more theatrical. And here's the truth, no one wants to admit, Representative Crockett doesn't belong on this stage with me. She hasn't earned it. She's a rookie, untested, out of her depth. While I've defended America on the world stage, she's been busy chasing headlines. Each line struck like a hammer. The chamber filled with the heavy thud of arrogance. Masquerading as authority, journalists scribbled furiously, knowing they were witnessing a spectacle. Supporters of Pompeo smirked, whispering to each other as though the outcome was already decided. But Jasmine Crockett, she didn't move, she didn't flinch. Her hands remained folded, her gaze steady, her posture unwavering. To some, it looked like restraint. To others, it looked like surrender. But those watching closely saw something else entirely, a gathering storm hidden beneath unshakable calm. Pompeo pressed harder. Circling like a predator convinced the prey was cornered. She's silent because she has no defense, he said with a mocking grin. She knows I'm right. Everyone in this room knows I'm right. Her silence is proof enough. He let the words hang, savoring them like a final blow. The smirk on his face widened. He believed the debate was over before Crockett had even opened her mouth. To him, victory was in the optics. A seasoned statesman, reducing a freshman congresswoman to silence. He leaned back slightly, satisfied, as if daring her to prove him wrong. The tension in the chamber was unbearable. Viewers at home sat forward, in their seats, hearts pounding, waiting for anything to break the stalemate. Whispers moved like waves through the audience. Was Crockett really going to sit there and let this stand? Then, almost imperceptibly, she moved. She lifted her chin, just slightly, and adjusted the microphone before her. The simple motion shifted the air in the room. Those paying attention straightened in their seats. Journalists paused mid-sentence. It was a signal, subtle but undeniable. Jasmine Crockett was about to speak. The silence that followed was deafening. Pompeo tilted his head, still smirking, confident that whatever she said could not possibly undo the barrage he had unleashed. But his smirk betrayed ignorance, because what Crockett carried into that silence was not desperation, it was precision. Drew in a breath, her eyes never leaving his. The entire chamber seemed to hold its own breath in response, waiting for the moment to land. And then, with the calmest voice in the room, she began dismantling him. The silence was thick, almost theatrical. Pompeo leaned back with the smug look of a man convinced his work was done. But that silence belonged to Jasmine Crockett now. She let it linger, let it stretch just long enough for every heartbeat in the room to sync with her stillness. And then, with a voice as steady as steel, she began. Mr. Pompeo, you've built a career telling the American people that strength means shouting the loudest. That intimidation equals leadership. But let me remind you, real strength isn't measured in arrogance. It's measured in integrity. The words landed like the crack of a whip. A low murmur rippled across the audience. Pompeo's smirk faltered, just slightly. She continued, eyes locked on him. You stand here tonight, boasting about foreign policy victories, when the truth is, your tenure left America's credibility in shambles. You said you defended our allies, yet you undermined NATO. You said you championed democracy, yet you cozied up to dictators. You preached loyalty, but let's be clear, your loyalty was never to the people. It was to one man, and one man only. The audience reacted audibly, a mixture of gasps and murmurs. Pompeo shifted in his seat, his hand tightening on the armrest. Crockett leaned in slightly, her tone sharpening. You called me untested. But let's test this. You said America deserves leaders who stand up under pressure. Yet when the truth mattered most, when accountability was on the line, you hid behind closed doors. You stonewalled. You refused testimony. You treated transparency as a threat. And tonight, you dare accuse me of silence. The chamber erupted with hushed whispers, heads turning, eyes widening. Pompeo tried to maintain composure, but his jaw tightened, his lips twitching as though searching for a retort that refused. To come, Crockett, let the moment breathe. She had the audience. Now and then she went for the rhythm, the devastating repetition that turned Pompeo's own words against him. You said, strength, but you showed fear. You said loyalty, but you betrayed trust. You said integrity, but you lived hypocrisy. Each line came slower, sharper, delivered with the precision of a trial attorney dismantling a hostile witness. The crowd leaned in, hanging on every syllable. Cameras zoomed in on Pompeo's face, now drained of its earlier smugness. He shifted in his seat, his forced half-smile betraying the discomfort he couldn't hide. Crockett pressed harder. You accused me of chasing headlines. But let's be honest, if anyone here has chased the spotlight, it's you. You chased it all the way into positions of power, only to use those positions to serve your ambition, not the American people. And yet, you stand here mocking me. Sir, the difference between us is simple. I fight for my community. You fought for yourself. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then growing louder. Moderators tried to calm the room, but the wave of validation was unstoppable. People nodded, whispered to each other, some even smiling knowingly. The balance of the room had shifted completely. Pompeo finally tried to interject, raising his voice. That's simply not true, but Crockett cut him off, not with volume, but with poise. She raised a hand, palm down, as if dismissing the interruption. Please, don't mistake my patience for weakness. You've been speaking all night, drowning in your own echo chamber. It's my turn. The crowd gasped, some even laughing. At the audacity of her dismissal, Pompeo's face reddened. His smirk evaporated, replaced by a stammer he couldn't suppress. Crockett delivered the final blows with surgical precision. America doesn't need more bulldogs snapping at truth. America needs leaders who understand dignity, who respect facts, who don't hide behind bluster and insult. You call me unworthy of this stage. No, Mr. Pompeo. The truth is, you've shown us tonight that you don't deserve it. The room erupted. Applause thundered. Shouts of agreement pierced the air. Reporters scribbled furiously, and the moderators had to raise their voices to restore order. It was chaos, the kind that only comes when the audience has witnessed the scales of power tip in real time. Pompeo sat frozen, eyes darting, his earlier bravado shattered. He tried to force a smile, tried to recover, but the damage was done. Every camera, every microphone, every pair of eyes was on Jasmine Crockett. She leaned back in her chair, composed, unshaken, the storm she unleashed now swirling entirely around her opponent. For a moment, the room wasn't a debate stage. It was a courtroom, and Pompeo had just been found guilty in the court of public opinion. And then, just as she had begun, Crockett let silence finish the work. She folded her hands, looked calmly at the moderators, and said nothing more. It was the silence of victory. The silence of a mic drop. The audience knew it. The cameras knew it. Pompeo knew it. Jasmine Crockett had not only defended herself, she had conquered, but the real explosion wasn't in the room. It was what happened next. Across America. The moment the debate ended, the chamber was still buzzing, but the real aftershocks erupted online. Within minutes, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok lit up with clips of Jasmine Crockett's takedown. Hashtags shot to the top of the trending list. Hashtag Crockett silences Pompeo. Hashtag mic drop moment, and hashtag truth over arrogance. Millions of users shared the same 20-second clip, Pompeo's smirk dissolving into stunned silence as Crockett's.com. Razor-sharp words cut through him. Memes exploded. Across time, one viral image showed Pompeo's slack jaw captioned, "When you realize the debate isn't rehearsal." Another paired Crockett's poised expression with the line, "Patience isn't weakness, it's the calm before the storm." TikTok. Creators layered Crockett's speech over dramatic music, slow-motion replays capturing every flicker of Pompeo's discomfort. Even teenagers who normally skipped politics were sharing the moment with captions like, "This is how you check arrogance." Commentators jumped in fast. On MSNBC, pundits marveled at the composure Crockett showed under fire. On CNN, analysts described her as a masterclass in calm strength against bluster. Even typically conservative outlets couldn't avoid replaying the exchange, though they struggled to spin it in Pompeo's favor. His defenders called her response to polished, while others admitted privately that he had been caught flat-footed. Late-night hosts feasted on the footage. One compared Pompeo's frozen expression to a computer buffering with bad Wi-Fi. Another said, "If arrogance were a balloon, Jasmine Crockett just popped it with a needle." Laughter rippled through audiences nationwide, but beneath the jokes, there was admiration. Crockett had become more than a headline. She was a symbol. Politicians chimed in as well. Progressive leaders hailed her courage, noting how she embodied integrity. When it mattered most, grassroots organizers called her performance the kind of fearlessness we've been waiting for. Even independents and moderates, weary of constant bickering, admitted they respected her ability to dismantle Pompeo without raising her voice. The validation was emotional, almost cathartic. For countless viewers, immigrants, women, working families, Crockett represented something deeply personal. She wasn't just standing up to Pompeo. She was standing up to every dismissive smirk, every arrogant voice that had ever tried to silence them. Her calm defiance became their defiance. Her victory felt like theirs. And Pompeo, he became a meme, a cautionary tale, the picture of overconfidence undone by truth. His allies scrambled to change the subject, but the internet had already judged him. No headline could rewrite the footage, burned into millions of screens. By sunrise the next morning, Crockett's clip had surpassed 10 million views. Editorials praised her as the new voice of accountability. Hashtags turned into slogans. For one electrifying night, The story wasn't about Pompeo's attack. It was about a woman who flipped the script, silenced the arrogance, and reminded America of what strength truly looked like. But beyond the memes and headlines, Crockett's words carried a deeper lesson. In the end, Jasmine Crockett's response wasn't just about silencing Mike Pompeo. It was about something much larger, a reminder that dignity outlasts arrogance, that truth always has more weight than bluster. The clip may have gone viral because of the drama, but what people felt in their hearts was deeper. They saw themselves in that moment. They saw what it looks like when someone refuses to bow, refuses to cower, refuses to let lies define the story. Crockett took what was meant to be a personal assault and transformed it into a universal lesson. She showed that real strength isn't about volume or intimidation. It isn't about sneers, smirks, or the false bravado of a bully. Real strength is composure under fire, clarity when the room is clouded with noise, and courage when silence seems like the safer choice. Her words were more than a rebuttal. They were a declaration that public service is about truth, not self-promotion, about justice, not power plays. Pompeo came armed with rehearsed insults and political theater, but Crockett came armed with something stronger, conviction. And conviction, once spoken, cannot be undone. For every immigrant family who has ever been told they didn't belong, for every working-class parent who has been dismissed by the powerful, for every young woman who has been underestimated in a room full of men, Crockett's.com defiance was a torch. It said, you belong, you matter, and your voice can rise above even the loudest attempts to drown it out. This wasn't just about Pompeo or Crockett. It was about all of us. About what kind of politics we choose to reward, and what kind of future we want to build. Do we side with arrogance dressed up as strength, or with dignity that refuses to break? Do we accept the smug certainty of those who think power belongs only to them, or do we lift up those who fight for honesty, justice, and service to the people? In that chamber, America got a glimpse of the answer. It wasn't the sneer that people remembered. It wasn't the insult or the false bravado. It was the quiet power of a woman who let her silence build into something undeniable, and then unleashed the truth with precision. That truth echoed louder than Pompeo's voice ever could. And so, the lesson is clear. Arrogance may dominate a moment, but dignity defines the legacy. Lies may rattle off fast, but truth endures. And when truth is spoken with courage, it can turn the tide in a room, in a country, in a generation. That's why this moment will be remembered for years to come. Mike Pompeo came into that chamber armed with arrogance, convinced that his insults would leave Jasmine Crockett rattled. Instead, his attack backfired spectacularly. What was meant to silence her only amplified her strength. His smirk dissolved, his words crumbled, and in the end, he was left in the one position he never expected, silent. Crockett's reply wasn't just an answer to Pompeo. It was a reminder that dignity always outshines arrogance, that calm conviction is stronger than bluster, and that truth will always find its voice. Moments like this matter because they cut through the noise. They show us the kind of leadership we need, the kind of courage we should celebrate, and the kind of future we can demand together. But these moments can't live in silence. They spread when we share them, when we lift them, when we choose to stand with voices like Jasmine Crockett's. So if you believe in truth over arrogance, if you want to see dignity rise above bluster, share this story, join us, subscribe, stand with truth, and be part of the movement that refuses to be silenced. Because this isn't just her fight, it's ours.